light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call. This is the time we give it all. Lynne Scott Hagerman bringing the fire. Words that ignite hearts burning higher. Faith and power, no chains can bind. Step into the light and leave fear behind.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lynne Scott Hagerman podcast, where truth has no filter, freedom is our mission, and the light of God exposes every work of darkness. I am your host, Lynne Scott Hagerman, survivor of child trafficking and government experimentation underground at a U.S.-based university medical center in conjunction with our government through MK Ultra mind control. I am the voice they tried to silence, and I am silent no more. Praise God. I am a child of God, a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and a friend of Holy Spirit, and my call is clear and unwavering. I'm to expose the darkness, elevate the survivors and the whistleblowers, reveal the truth, restore lives, and protect our little ones. This broadcast airs Tuesday through Friday and Sunday at 2 o'clock Central across all of the Patriots Prayer Network's broadcast platforms, reaching 1.5 million worldwide. Today, I'm also an international award-winning human resource consultant, marathoner, weightlifter, living proof that restoration is possible in mind, body, and spirit. Praise God. Please visit qgrit.org. That's God's plan for the aftercare of the little ones once they're rescued from above ground and below ground trafficking, as well as to help adults with any type of trauma. And please be sure to visit, too, my LifeWave website, where I'm an independent distributor at liveyoungerwithlynne.com. Lynne is Lynnne. And the LifeWave won the Independent Stem Cell Innovator of the Year Award. And if you know what your stem cells do to you, for you, you know what you've got a hold of with this product, which is why I call it the wearable med bed. Now, let's continue bringing everything into the light and presence of God. Today, folks, we're going to go full throttle, and I know you know it because I can tell by the huge, this is, I believe, the largest audience I have for a show starting out of the gate. So you're ready to go full throttle too. We're going to go full throttle on the biggest stories shaking the world and our borders, from Iran streets erupting against the regime to the front lines of the immigration enforcement right here at home. President Trump is on offense like never before. Joining me today is the one, the only Jeffrey Lord, sharp, fearless, always ready to cut through the noise. I am so very, very grateful to have him here. And welcome to my podcast, Jeffrey. It is an honor and a blessing to have you on.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here. And I have to say, I'm looking over here to my right to the television. The president is on live right now and is saying that the killing is slowing down in Iran. I don't know any more details than that, but something is going on as we're speaking. So stay tuned, as it were.
Yes, breaking news. Well, since that is happening, maybe that should be our first topic that we jump into.
Yeah, it's, Iran has been an interesting focal point in American history, long forgotten by a lot of people, is that when Franklin Roosevelt was president and had a summit meeting with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, they met in Tehran. And I've often thought, wow, none of the three of them would recognize what's going on in Iran. For most of our lives, it was run by the Shah of Iran. And then in the Jimmy Carter era, things started to fall apart, and it became a mess, and it's still a mess. And I think this time around, thanks in part to President Trump making crystal clear what he's not going to sit still for. And I think that is helping to straighten things out and get things calmed down. We will see.
You did a wonderful article about Trump's social posts on Truth Social, the different posts, where he's speaking directly to the Iranians, full caps, help is on the way, keep protesting, take over your institutions. Could this be what finally brings down Khomeini?
I think that's entirely possible. Um, one of the things that I love about President Trump, as I loved about my former boss, President Reagan, is they have developed such a reputation that people learned, bad guys in particular, learned the hard way. They mean what they say, and they are more than capable of acting on what they say. And, I think back to President Reagan, and there was a communist uprising in Grenada, the island of, out there in the Caribbean. And they had this uprising, they took hostages, etc. And the president more or less said, give them back now. They didn't. And he swept in there with the U.S. military. They rescued the hostages and got rid of the communist dictatorship, etc. And what that says is it sends the message that the president of the United States means what he says, and don't mess around, don't fool around. And I think that President Trump has exactly the same reputation here. He obviously swept into Venezuela and took the criminal President Maduro. I put president in quotes.
Exactly.
And,
more like maybe a drug lord, right?
yeah, exactly. And he is now resting ever so uncomfortably in a New York City jail, which I find somewhat amusing. But the point is that when you have presidents who are seen on the international scene as meaning exactly what they say, people learn, don't mess with them. And I think that is one of the things that is going on in Iran right now, is that they're beginning to realize. I mean, and remember, God bless them, those hostages, that whole hostage crisis that wound up helping to elect President Reagan, took place in the Carter years. And it was, I mean, if ever there was a good and decent man, it was Jimmy Carter. But as a president, he was not your basic Reagan or Trump or Lincoln, who meant what he said. And the difference was, I always think back, and I was there when Ronald Reagan was sworn in.
Wow.
And it was amazing, because he gets sworn in, and then they come up to him behind the scenes and hand him a note that tells him that the hostages have just been released and taken to a plane, and they're being flown to West Germany, which was another way of saying they weren't going to mess with the new President Reagan. And that, I think, is very much what is going to be going on here with President Trump.
Do you see that? So he has this aggressive new approach to foreign policy. What do you see happening with other nations? Do you think other dictators, world leaders, are maybe pausing before they start to do activities that President Trump would not approve of?
I do think that. I think that they don't want trouble for themselves. They are about their own mission as they see it in life, et cetera, et cetera. And I think when it comes to President Trump, one of the things I know from reading a lot of history and having worked in the White House, and when a president gets a second term, they're looking at the calendar, and the days are counting down, and they know at the end of it, they will not be president anymore. There is no third term. They're not Franklin Roosevelt. All of that has changed. And so if they want to accomplish something, now is the time. And I think that's very much what's going on with President Trump. And he's looking at around this world, and he has this unique background because of his business experience that took him all the way around the world, building Trump Towers and Trump hotels all across the world. He sees the world in a sense and says, what can I do to leave it in better shape than I found it, and make sure, or to the best that he can, that it will be in good shape long after he is gone. And I think he's very much aware of that. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing unfold.
Do you think that there are other places in the world that we might be seeing him take some action soon?
Well, I think Venezuela was on the list there, and I think what he's probably trying to do in one way or another is to make sure that the Western Hemisphere is free, and that it's filled with democracies and all this, and whether it's Mexico immediately south of us or whether it's Venezuela, no one has the gall to touch the Panama Canal. I can assure you of that.
Yes.
He's very, very Theodore Rooseveltian in that sense. And I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Theodore Roosevelt, who, after he was president, well, he'd already resolved the crisis and took Panama. And there's a photograph of him as an ex-president on a steam shovel in the middle of Panama, digging the Panama Canal.
No, I have not seen that. That would be great.
which tells you something about Theodore Roosevelt, who was very Trumpian, or Trump is very Rooseveltian, however you want to put it. So, yeah, I think he wants to leave the world as best he can, permanently better off than when he found it. And I think that's what his objective is, and I think this is how he goes about it. And some of it surprises Americans and the world. Some of it may even surprise him, but do it he will.
So let's go to Venezuela, since you brought that up. We have a We the People audience, patriots, faith-based folks. Help everyone understand what did we see happen in Venezuela? Why did that happen? How is it carried out? And what's going to happen moving forward?
Well, Venezuela, as frankly has happened before in South American countries, Venezuela fell into a situation where they had military dictatorship. And in today's world, what sort of made it even worse was the presence of the drug trade, which was relatively new because all these super drugs are out there, fentanyl and all of this sort of stuff. And it became an incredibly lucrative business. And this sort of thing where we would see in this day and age aerial shots from planes, and you're looking at these boats out there in the Caribbean, motorboats and all this, and what they're doing is taking drugs and running them by water to get to the United States, and then they get paid enormous sums of money. And then, of course, what happens to American kids and Americans, period. I mean, it's an awful thing. And Trump was determined that he was not going to sit still for this. So that, in turn, when he realized that Venezuela was one of the real sources of the problem here, that was it. He sent the troops in. They were, and I have to say, the U.S. military gets so much credit for being a highly efficient, well-oiled machine.
Yes.
And they went in there. There was not a single American casualty. They took the Maduros. They, ended this sort of thing. And now the job is to keep an eye on it and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I'm sure there are people in Venezuela who would want to do things and are not doing bad things and are not doing them because they realize Trump will come after them. Message sent. And, to go back to President Reagan, this is one of the lessons from President Reagan. It's just an old human lesson. President Reagan used to talk about peace through strength. But one of the things that he found out was when he invaded Grenada and overthrew threw out the communist leader and all this sort of stuff, the place where this got the most attention was very quietly inside the Kremlin, because they began to realize he means what he says. And so there was the incentive to go the Gorbachev route and peace through strength and negotiate and all of that kind of thing, which they did. And Reagan, one of the inside stories that when I was in the White House, we had in 1986, we were sending him around the country to campaign for Republican candidates, which is what incumbent presidents do for their party.
Right.
And so he was out, and all of a sudden we got the word that we had to stop everything cold because Gorbachev wanted a summit out of the blue in Reykjavik, Iceland. Well, you know, those of us on the staff moaned about this, but we're talking a serious deal here, not just
Right.
electing somebody to Congress.
Yeah.
So we call a halt to the whole thing. He flies off to Reykjavik. And as I was told by some of my colleagues who were there in the room, I was not there. I was back in the White House. And they're in the room negotiating a takedown of the level of nuclear missiles. And they've got it pretty well done. And Reagan is getting ready to get out of his chair and, you know, thinks things are fine. And suddenly Gorbachev says, but I want you to get rid of the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, as it was called.
I remember.
And Reagan says, well, I can't do that. I promised this to the American people. This is a very big deal. No, I can't do this. Gorbachev insists. And in very Reagan style, Reagan slaps the desk, looks to his left or right to George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State, and says, let's go, George. Gets up out of the chair and leads the Americans out and down the stairs of this schoolhouse. Well, Gorbachev comes running around the long table and runs over to him, and they're walking down the stairs, and you can see by now the photographs are out there. You can see on Reagan's face a scowl and all this. And Gorbachev, the limo was right there for Reagan to get in and take him back to the airport and back home. Gorbachev says, I don't know what more I could have done, to which Reagan says, you could have said yes. With that, gets in the limo, drives off. Now, move on a year, and it's December of 1987, and I'm there for this. I got to see this for sure. I have a picture of it right up here in my office. And Gorbachev has found that his way is not the right way, and he really does need to sign an agreement with Reagan. So he comes to Washington, comes to the White House. They have a big ceremony. Reagan very graciously has this big ceremony. They've got the copies of this treaty, and they sit at a desk, and Reagan signs his and gives it to Gorbachev, and Gorbachev signs his and gives his away, and then they each speak and all this, and then they get up and they go to leave and everything. And then I saw him. I mean, the Soviet Union limousine, the equivalent of what we call in America the Beast, the Lincoln Continental, the armored. The Soviet version of this comes up the driveway with the Soviet and American flags flying, and they open the door. All these KGB guys, you know, and you're thinking to yourself, don't make a false move and play around with these guys.
Yeah.
And they open the door, and Gorbachev shakes Reagan's hand and waves, gets in the limo, off he goes. Mission accomplished. It came because Reagan was strong, peace through strength. And I just think that's if you're a kid, particularly if you're a boy, you learn the lesson, you know, from your parents. If you are dealing with some schoolyard bully and all this kind of thing, that give it back to them. Don't run. And peace through strength is the adult version of this. And that was true with Reagan, and that is certainly true with Donald Trump. I think the Iranians are probably aware of this, and certainly the Venezuelans have found out firsthand what that means.
So what do you think is going to happen to Maduro? Do you have any educated guesses on what he might be talking about in prison and information he might be sharing and where this might head?
Yeah, I think he's there for a very good long while. I forget what happened to Noriega from Panama, whether he died in prison or what the story was. But, he was forcibly removed by President Bush 41, and it didn't go well for him. And I think some version of that is what lies ahead for Maduro, because they're certainly not going to let him, I don't think, go back to Venezuela, because somebody like that could be back and would have people scheming to help him, and then you got to do the whole thing all over again. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Very good. So let's take it to the United States. We have all kinds of things happening within our borders. So let's start with Minnesota. The ICE shooting that is blowing up everywhere. We have that new video that's come out that shows Renee Good's wife yelling, "Drive, baby, drive," right before we saw the rest of the video. So what do you think? Who's coming out on top of this narrative?
Well, I think eventually the right folks will come out on top of this narrative. But that said, I have to say, I do think we've got in the country at the moment a serious problem with the American left. And you watch what's going on in Minnesota, and then you see flickers of this in different places around the country.
Yeah.
They hate the United States, they hate America, and they want to do. I mean, what got this young woman killed was just unbelievable irresponsibility, driving into the middle of all of this chaos and deliberately causing a problem, and then she runs over an ICE officer.
I know.
Hello, but the fact that they think they can do these things, and they
Yes.
do, is a problem. And I have to say, you pull back to 30,000 feet, the American left has always had a problem with this. When I was a kid, I remember learning for the first time that, and this was in the height of the pro-civil rights movement, which was a good thing, Dr. King and all this stuff.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, Newark, New Jersey, erupts in a race riot, with leftists out there, torching everything. And then it spread, and it was Detroit and Washington, I think, and all this kind of thing. And you look on, and different the Wall Street episode there, Occupy Wall Street, where suddenly there was eruption of violence with these people going after Wall Street. Their first response by a number of people in their groups, no matter what age or what the problem is to take to the streets and bring on the violence. And it's just not a healthy thing. But it is, I think we have to realize, a permanent factor here. And if you are going to be the governor of a state, you better learn how to cope with this if this happens in your state or your major city. And I think, frankly, that lesson has not been given. And I think it's complicated with people on the left because their sympathies, even if they're not violent, their sympathies are with the protesters, whatever those protesters might be protesting about. And so there's a little hesitation about doing some of these things that would ordinarily stop them because they're afraid of what political damage they'll do to themselves from their own folks on the left. And so I think we've got a real problem here with this. You have not, by any stretch, I think, heard the last of it. And it's easy to make President Trump a scapegoat. I mean, but I assure you, the day after President Trump is no longer president, if let's say in fact, I think the leading candidate on our side at the moment is J.D. Vance. If there is a President J.D. Vance, you're going to be dealing with the same situation all over again. Trump was an excuse. He's not the reason. And I think that that's going to be true with whatever Republican there is that succeeds Donald Trump.
Why does the left hate the United States so much, in your opinion?
And this is a thing that really frosts me. I mean, having read a considerable bit of American history, it was slave owners who got together and created the Democratic Party. And when you follow through the history, and then the Civil War comes and it ends, and so what happens? These same people, the pro-slavery people, they form segregation and segregate the country and go about all of that. And in our lifetime, this battle had to be fought to put an end to that. But you've just got all these people whose instinctive dislike for various groups of people, well, they don't like this group or they don't like that group, et cetera, propels them. And so consequently, if you're defending it, it propels them to act against you, to carry out problems in the streets and all of this kind of thing. Their view of freedom is they get to do anything they want and everybody better do what they say or there's big trouble. And, you know, most Americans just want to live their life, right? They want to raise their kids if they've got them. They want to go to work, have a good job, do something they like, and all of that kind of thing. But you've got people out there who are possessed about doing something else and not hesitating to use violence along the way. And we've seen more than enough in the way of riots in my lifetime to see how this works. And you know, I live in the middle of Pennsylvania, South Central Pennsylvania, just about 3 miles from the state capitol, from the literal state capitol building.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you know, like this no kings business.
Yes.
Well, sure enough, I hopped in the car, parked in a garage that was relatively close, and then walked up to the Capitol. And yep, there they were. No kings, and you know, this about Donald Trump and that about Donald Trump, and all this in the middle of Pennsylvania Dutch country. You know, just drives you a little crazy. But I think that's just a fact, and you got to live with it.
Well, they're so well organized. This, you know, when this first started years ago, the recent riots we've been seeing, at first we the people thought it was our, you know, normal exhibiting our rights, protesting. We have a right to protest, but that's not what this is. It's very coordinated, very well funded. What is that about?
Well, I think that there is, in fact, a very well organized group of people, and I don't profess to know how large it is, but they're all ideologically committed leftists, and they have a network. They have a funding network. And, you know, you look at somebody like George Soros, and he's getting on in age, and I guess he's got a son who is picking up the reins from dad and all this kind of thing. And these are people who realize that for this to work well, they need, from their perspective, they need to have money. And so these money routes are set up to pay people to do things. And I saw a video clip of, and I forget where I saw this, but one of these protests, and they were talking to a reporter, and the person volunteers, well, I get paid for this.
Yes.
Shocking. Not.
Yes, it's astounding. Well, with the Renee Good situation, she was part of the Minnesota ICE Watch, which I know you've written about this too, was training people to defy ICE, to do apparently illegal activities for their cause.
Well, you know, the thing that gets me is, and I've seen this all my life, you get people on the left, and they really do want to cause a problem. They have no hesitation about doing that at all. And in a situation like the one we're talking about, any sensible person would not get in their car and drive into the middle of all of this and create a problem eventually for themselves. But they don't think of it that way. They think, well, they'll go down there and they'll show, in this case, they'll show the ICE officers and all of this kind of thing. And so then, of course, human nature being what it is, things get off track. People do things that are not expected, and the next thing you know, you've got a real problem. And some of these people, quite obviously, as we've seen, get hurt, or in that case, got killed. I mean, the notion that you can drive your car into the middle of one of these situations and quite deliberately run over an ICE officer and think nothing is going to happen, or try to run over and think nothing is going to happen. And the kicker is, this woman's roommate or quote unquote wife, however she describes herself, was giving her instructions to, to aid her. Go
Yes.
to it, do it, do this, do that, etc. And only now is saying ruefully, it's my fault. Well, yeah, you urged her to go do this stuff, and we've seen the video, and there she is plunging into the middle of all this, turning her car around, turning it into a blockade and all of this kind of thing, and the cops are trying to get control of this, and she tries to run one over, and he, in quite legitimate self-defense, pulls out his gun and shoots. Hello, she'd be alive today if she didn't go down there.
Exactly. And it makes me wonder, is the left just delusional? Because I've been reading on social media, it appears like she has 3 children. So she had 3 children in school, in a different state. So what was she doing away from the children? Most moms would think, I better not go in the middle of a violent ICE.
Right.
I better not take my car. But it's unfathomable, every choice and decision that she made to put herself right where she did. And I've seen videos too of her roommate, or again, however she's being defined, taking videos of them doing things like
Right.
Proud Warriors or something. It's unfathomable to me, because it just seems like delusional decision making.
Well, this is what the left, and I was about to say the American left, but the left in general has always been like this. I mean, long before we were around, and there were Russians who were unhappy with the Tsar, what did they do? They rallied to the newly formed Communist Party, and they had all kinds of problems in Moscow and other places in Russia until they got the Tsar overthrown and, as I recall, executed and all of this kind of thing. This is what they do. And frankly, it doesn't, you can go all the way back to the very long ago of the French Revolution. And this same mentality was there. And, in those days, it involved the guillotine, and all that kind of thing. But this is what goes on in that mindset. And I frankly don't think we're ever going to be able to change it if it's been around for more than a century. I mean, when you think of this, our American Revolution was so, in retrospect, unusual. All we wanted was the Brits out, and we wanted our own freedom and our own democracy, which we then very carefully set up, and we've had ever since. Wow. And you've got these other people that they think they have what they want, and then they just go on and they make the situation worse. And it's like having a revolution every day. You wake up and what revolution am I having today?
Exactly.
With my oatmeal, and it's bad stuff for sure.
Well, because you're exactly right, because you see them almost like I envision a garage with different signs and different changes of clothing. And whenever there's the next event, they change signs, they change clothes, and they're shouting for that. And then that's over, and there's the next event, grab a different sign, change clothes. And it's, I wonder why they live here, because they do hate the United States so much.
Yeah, well, I think in a bizarre fashion, the hate is what turns them on. And I mean, that is very, very bizarre.
Would make sense.
You would think that most people would just want to live their life, be grateful that they've got a life, and whatever life, and if they don't like it, change it in some way, but change it, for heaven's sakes, in some sort of peaceful fashion, and not run around trying to burn buildings down and torch people's places of business, like we saw in, what was it, 2020 with the riots and all that kind of thing.
Yes.
This is what people like that do, and then they try and blame it on somebody else when in fact they need to look in the mirror.
It's their choices. So speaking of what people do, let's jump into all this fraud. I mean, every time we turn around, we're just the exposure of the fraud is beyond the pale. The most recently, you had written about the food stamp scam with the immigrants, the Haitians in Boston. So what's happened there? Food stamps. That's a new scam for us.
Yeah, well, as I recall, it's been a little bit of time, but as I recall, they more or less infiltrated the food stamp situation, and you had all of these Haitians who were part of this scheme. It's interesting to me that you get some people coming into this country who think, "Wow, look at all this stuff. I'm going to figure out a way to milk the system and get everything I can out of it." And that's in essence what's going on in Minnesota.
Yes.
And you have these people from Somalia, and it has nothing to do, in a sense, with being from Somalia. It has to do with you're not from America. You come to America and you think this is what you can do to get your hands on a lot of money, and that's the bottom line, period. So that's what is done, whether it's cash or whether it's food stamps or what have you. This is what goes on. It's not good, but I think sometimes you hear about burglaries or things like that, but you don't hear that somebody who's poor has been robbed. they, they,
That's
they,
right.
they go to somebody's mansion, or they go to some, any place where they sense there is money. That's the driving force, and they go for it. And that's what's been going on in Minnesota quite clearly with this. And one of the problems too is this is one of the flaws of big government. If you were going to create a government that is so massively big that you can't possibly keep track of everything that's going on inside it, and there are people out there who think, I'm going to figure out one angle of it here, and I'm going to work on that. The school choice stuff, and getting money from daycare. That's what I mean. I don't mean school choice. Daycare centers.
Yeah.
And all of this. And so they're going to set up a daycare center, get the money, and then nobody shows up at the daycare center, and they just take the money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking if this is to be the racket and the norm, I'm just going to call Jeff Care and start asking for big checks to be sent my way because I'm taking care of myself.
I love it.
It's bizarre.
It is bizarre. And so when I think about Minnesota, as this started unraveling, there were several fascinating layers. First of all, it started being exposed by a guy with a camera. I mean, just an everyday American that goes out and it's rocked the nation, everything that he discovered. And then it's resulting in exposure. I was just reading, I believe in California, Newsom has the same problem with a lot of ghost daycare centers that don't exist.
Yeah, I find this very interesting in the sense that in our day and age, off and on, you get people who want to get into the journalism field, and they are smart enough, as this Nick Shirley clearly is, to figure out where to look and to have a camera always at the ready. And of course, in this day and age, you're not running around with any bulky thing over your shoulder.
That's
You're
right.
running with this thing that can just fit into your jeans pocket, and you pull it out and you start recording everything. And he clearly has made a study of what he is looking at, and then has the smarts to get it out there in public view. And now, of course, the authorities have seen it. I mean, I think President Trump has seen it at this point.
Yeah.
So, good for him. But and we've always had that sort of streak in American life where they used to call it yellow journalism or something in the days long before we were around. And you had people who were out suddenly investigating, declaring themselves to be journalists, and they go out there and they get enough attention and they accurately report something that's going on. And that's exactly what's happened here. And I must say, a source of sort of amusement. I mean, when I grew up, Minnesota politics was synonymous with the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which was liberal but very up and honest. I mean, its exemplars were people like Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale and Eugene McCarthy. Wow, I mean, you could disagree with them on this, that, or the other thing, but honorable people, all three of them were. Two of them becoming vice president, and one of them making a pretty considerable run for president in the Democratic primaries in 1968, I guess it was. Good for them. And Minnesota has fallen considerably if they're now no longer doing that stuff, but playing around with fraud and manipulating things and getting people in trouble and getting some poor woman shot. I mean, somewhere Hubert Humphrey is not smiling.
You know, when you think about Minnesota, there has to be people in the government that are involved, because how do
Right.
people even get away with this? I mean, the state has a budget, they receive federal dollars, there's supposed to be audits that are happening. And I don't know if this is true or not, because, you know, you can't believe everything on social media. But they said that someone, if this is accurate, researched the location of the auditing firm for Minnesota and Ohio for these sorts of things, for Michigan and Ohio, Minnesota, Michigan, anyway, 2 or 3 states. And it was Jebba's, it was in a retail strip mall, secondhand store called Jebba something. And that was the address to the auditing firm of these things for 2 states. I don't know if you've seen that or heard that, but if it's accurate, it just adds to the story, another layer of what's going on.
The thing to remember always is human beings are human beings. They can be good, they can be bad, they can be indifferent. And with some of them, when you get into a situation where there's lots of bucks flowing around, you're going to find some people are not as scrupulous as you would like, and they're going to figure out some way to get their hands on this money and run with it. And I think that's exactly what's happened here. And there were clearly no checks and balances in the governor's office, starting with the governor himself, to put an end to this or to pull it up. So you've got this huge situation which has just grown and grown and grown, just absolutely blossomed out there. And it's pretty clear to me, I started my career when I graduated from college working in the Pennsylvania State Senate. And, you know, I'm working for the Senate Republican leader of the day. And one of the things you learn is that in our state, we have a pretty powerful governor's office. And we had people keeping an eye on him. The governor of the day was Democrat Milton Schaap, who was a self-made zillionaire and all this, and used his money to get himself elected governor. Well, Republicans were no fan of his politics, but in particular, they kept an eye on his administration and who he was bringing into them, and, you know, from Democratic machines around the country and around the state, rather, and all of this kind of thing. You've got to have people who are watching. And if you don't have that, you're going to get into a problem. And when you've got essentially a one-party state, then who's watching the store? The answer is nobody.
What do you think is going to happen next?
Oh, wow. Well, I do think some people are going to see jail time.
Oh, that would be great. You know, we're all waiting for justice, Jeffrey, and we're not seeing it that often.
The question is who, how many, how high up? I mean, is the governor going to find himself, in wearing pinstripes or an orange jumpsuit? Frankly, it looks a lot closer to that than I ever thought would be possible. We will see. I'm not sure that there's absolutely the key evidence of anything yet other than incompetence. But I do believe, you know, you've got federal investigators, the Federal Department of Justice, others looking into this, and I believe that it is entirely possible that somebody is going to pay a real price for this.
I've been following the news on that. The whistleblowers, there are several whistleblowers that have come forward at the state level, alleging that they told the governor that this was happening and he just ignored it all.
Right.
So I don't know how complicit or not that makes him.
Well, it can or it cannot. It can just mean incompetence, and that is what they'll have to figure out. And clearly, there will be eyewitnesses and whistleblowers and all this kind of thing, and they'll either confirm that he's incompetent, or they'll confirm that he had a hand in this. And of course, one of the places to look is his bank account to see what's going on. I myself am leaning to incompetence here. I just watched the guy, and I think he didn't know what he's doing here, and probably still doesn't. But that said, his reputation has been made for sure. This is the end of his public career, without doubt.
We're seeing this fraud also being exposed in other states. I was reading that
Yes.
Maine has also had exposure. I think there was a Somalian group that created a healthcare organization that wasn't providing healthcare, assisted living facilities in condos and houses that weren't assisted living facilities in other states. It's very concerning.
Yeah, I think I even saw a story that there were stirrings of this kind of story out in California.
Yes.
With Gavin Newsom.
Yes,
I think
daycares.
it's too soon to weigh in on it. I have no idea, but it doesn't surprise me, because I know enough about how government operates to know that if you're Governor A on the East Coast, you get to know Governor Z on the West Coast, and you trade governor talk, and you all sorts of things can happen, and you get little tips of, well, you know what he's doing, don't you?
Yeah.
And this can blossom into other things. So I think we will find out. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if this kind of stuff in Minnesota is surfacing in more than one other state. I don't know which one it would be, but Minnesota, I would have thought would be an unlikely candidate, but here we go.
Exactly. So we will watch that unfold. And speaking of unfolding, I wanted to talk about the kids. That topic is near and dear to my heart more than anything, of the missing children. And we know under the Biden administration, at least 300,000, and we've been hearing even likely more children came into the United States missing. And we recently heard that the Trump team found 127,000 missing migrant kids. So what do you know about that? What's the story?
Well, this is just horrendous, and this is something I never heard about until all of this. And the fact of the matter is, quite clearly, there were people being smuggled over the border and getting money for it.
Yes.
And I saw something just in the last day or two where some young woman was talking about how she had been smuggled and all of this kind of thing into America and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is a bad problem. I mean, if you want to look at it in a hard and fast and non-sentimental way, these kids are financial assets if they're captured.
That's right.
And wow, that just blows my mind that there would be a whole trade of these people, whether they're trafficked for sex or money or who knows what. It's bad news, period. And I do think that authorities in the federal government and the Trump administration are beginning to get the drift here with all of this, and that you really got to clamp down on it. And that of course means finding new ways to clamp down on it. That obviously what's been going on in the United States government hasn't effectively worked. to stop all this stuff, and now they got to figure out a way to do it. So I think that's, you know, when anybody runs for president, and Donald Trump in this case, you're thinking your issues are A, B, C, and D. And you get there, and out of the blue one morning, somebody comes in and says, Mr. President, did you hear about issue Z or Y or X?
Right.
And they didn't get elected president on this issue. They never heard of the issue. And all of a sudden now they got to deal with it. And it becomes a big deal. So that is I think that happens more often than we think, whether people are running for president or governor of their state or even mayor of a city. And, you know, it's not good. And you've got to get on it right away.
Exactly. Do you know any of the backstory behind them finding the children, how they did, or is this just all brand new to you as it is to me?
I really don't, other than it just sounds gruesome to me that they kidnap these kids, you know, off the streets, or you may even have family members selling their kids. And wow, it's just bad stuff. I don't know the details of how it's done, but that it is done is no question in my mind. And at some point, I would hope we are going to find out the how and the why, not to mention the who.
That's my prayer. And I'm hopeful that more and more news comes out, because I know people are going to be asking the same questions that I did. Where did you find them? What were they doing? Who brought them over? Who profited? And I know that they said that they found them and brought them back, returned them to their parents, it sounds like. So I guess an unfolding story.
Yes. Oh yeah, we're going to be hearing. I mean, I imagine this will go on throughout the entire Trump administration and on into the next one. It's just that bad of a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so, speaking of another bad problem that you've been writing about, verifying the voter rolls. So this is a big issue, that our voter rolls are inaccurate. And what is happening there with the DOJ? It sounds like they're suing 22 states.
Yeah, I think this is a real problem here. And, you know, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I assure you, we have had plenty of problems in Pennsylvania long before any of this. In places like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, urban areas, etc., you have machines, politics going on, and you know how many people show up to vote, and who they are, and all of that kind of thing. This has been going on longer than we've been alive, and the only thing I can say now is it has probably become more sophisticated in how it's done, but that it is done and has been done, I have absolutely no doubt about it. People, yeah, I have stories when I think back, stories of people registering, quote unquote, people to vote, and the person involved has no idea that he has signed in to vote 5 times or something like this.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
all sorts of stuff goes on. That is as old as America, I have a feeling. So hopefully we're a little better at catching these people and all this. But I will say the high techness of it can be a problem too.
So do you think that this time maybe the DOJ will be able to actually get these voter rolls cleaned up, or do you think it's still going to be an ongoing problem?
Oh, I think there'll be an ongoing. I think they'll make an attempt without doubt, and I think to some degree they'll succeed. It would just seem to me as a layman that there is a new high-tech way to do this kind of thing, to get it cleaned up and to run the system. But you know, who knows? I'm sufficiently removed at this point from it. I used to pay really close attention to it, which is how I could see, you know, what was done and how it was done, and people going door to door and all of that kind of stuff. It just was in these states, particularly states like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, uh, Michigan, where you have machine politics at work, and you've got people who really know how to massage the system in their fashion and get votes. And it,
Exactly.
you know, I'm a big JFK fan, and I remember reading in the Long Ago and Far Away uh, when he was elected in 1960. Uh, he apparently, it was very close, and they got to the like early morning hours of the day after the election, and it looked like it could go anyway. And JFK takes a call from Mayor Daley of Chicago and hangs up, and he says, well, I think with a little help from our friends in Chicago, we're going to be all right. Which is to say, the question goes up, how many votes do you need? And then you get the answer, and then you work the machine to get that number of votes recorded. And there was the soon-to-be president-elect of the United States, in essence, confessing this to, I mean, it was just to his local group of, his staff and all that kind of thing.
Right.
But memorable story nonetheless.
I had not heard that. And you're right, this has been going on a long time. I am hopeful that some gets cleaned up. I get concerned about all of the illegals that flooded across the border. And I had a friend who was in South Dakota for the first 6 months of last year. And whatever job she had at that time exposed her to 500 people who were illegal aliens who all had driver's license, and all of their birth dates was January 1st of, I don't know, 1980 something. And I just find it shocking. And that's South Dakota. I mean, that's a state that, like Minnesota, I wouldn't have thought all that fraud and stuff was possible. But it is. And I wouldn't have thought in South Dakota. And that's just something that one person saw. And I just wonder how much more of that is going on, and
Exactly.
who's in charge of our elections? Who's
One of
determining?
the things that I think is relatively new is one of the reasons for all of this illegal immigration is to get people across the border, stuff them someplace, and then make them voters.
Yeah.
And that can be a real serious problem when you're deliberately flooding the country with illegals, and the illegals are all given the right to vote, or not the right, but the ability to cast a vote. This is the 21st century version of fiddling around with the voting machines.
Yes.
That, I think, is a dawning problem that we really have to pay attention to.
I agree. And before the last question, I wanted to give a shout out. JJR, I see you there. I so appreciate your support. We've got Delapert, if I'm pronouncing that right, Cassis Rumble, C Spiker. Good to see everybody in the crowd. So, Jeff, everything that's going on, what do you see? What is your vision of the future? What would you predict? What do you see coming next with all of these issues worldwide and in the United States? What will you see happening?
Well, first of all, we have to get through the next 3 years of the Trump era, and I'm glad he's there. And I think by the time he leaves this world, and this country will be in a different, and I would suggest better place.
Amen.
That said, once that's done, you got to keep going. And as I say, my personal guess is that it's probably going to be J.D. Vance on our side. If you could inject some life into her and repeal her years, Hillary would do it again. But I don't think that's going to happen. So the other side is going to have to put somebody up there. And you know, this is always the interesting thing I find about the American election and electoral system is in 1964, to go back into my youth, go back in 1964, Barry Goldwater gets nominated by the Republicans and gets absolutely wiped off the planet. And 2 years later, and actually 1 year later, in 1965, I doing some research once, I found a story, a front page story in the New York Times, that the California Republican establishment was terrified because they thought they had a good chance to win the governorship in 1966, but and they had the leader of the state legislature, whose name escapes me, that they was their candidate, but there was this pesky movie actor and television star, and was getting all kinds of support, and they were terrified of this. Well, of course, we know how the rest of that story played out.
That's right.
And this is why I have all these pictures of him all around, because I worked for him and I got the pictures. There's one right there.
Oh, I love it. I remember that photo.
And they just didn't know. And, you know, out of the blue, he becomes governor. And then as I say, we know the rest of the story. My point is that at this minute, there is probably a future president and a Democrat walking around in the internals of the Democratic Party that the rest of us haven't heard about, who will get elected this year, perhaps, to Congress or as a governor or senator, etc. And suddenly there's all this talk about so-and-so being the Democratic nominee, or maybe for vice president or what have you. That is, in fact, the way the American system works, as evidenced by Ronald Reagan. So I will be interested to see the day after the election of this year if there is somebody who has emerged. I suspect that there will be, but who I could not possibly tell you at this moment. But I always enjoy it. I mean, that's how you have a homegrown American system, and people appear on the scene in one way or another, and they come up through the scene, and you know, when I was a kid, there was you know, a lack of Republican candidates, and suddenly somebody got the notion that a Rockefeller could get elected governor of New York, Nelson by name, and people were going, "Oh, don't be ridiculous! You couldn't allow it." I mean, John D. Rockefeller was a very unpopular guy for making all the money in the oil and all that kind of thing, and people said, "Oh, well, this just will never work." Well, lo and behold, he runs for governor and gets elected in a landslide as governor of New York. He finally did become vice president, appointed as such by Gerald Ford, as a result of the Nixon resignation, and Ford was vice president, moved up, and he got to appoint his successor. But he ran a couple times, and I was, laugh at this, in 1968, I was a 17-year-old page at the Republican National Convention in Miami Beach. And my good old dad escorted me down there, and I have my page orange. They gave us orange page vests for Florida, so that we could be seen on the convention floor, and the delegates could call us and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Rockefeller was very much in the running, and then so was the new Governor Reagan. And out of the blue came somebody that they all thought was a dead duck politically, and that was former Vice President Richard Nixon, who had lost to JFK in 1960, and then 2 years later ran for governor of California and got clobbered, and gave this famous press conference the morning after his loss as governor of California, and everybody was writing these stories that he was toast, and you know, that was the end of his political career. And he stands up with that trademark 5 o'clock shadow and says, well, gentlemen of the press, you can be relieved, you can be happy now, because I can tell you, you can write about it, you can talk about it, but this will be my last press conference. And with that, he stalked off the stage. And of course, by 1966, 2 years later, he was a very smart guy. I got a chance to meet him for a while
Really?
when I was in the White House. And he knew that the best way forward for him was to run around America in 1965 and 66 and campaign for Republican candidates for county commissioner and state senator and Congress and all of this sort of stuff. Because what did he do? He got himself exposed out there, and he got contributors. And so by 1968, the press is thinking that it's going to be, if not Nelson Rockefeller, it's going to be George Romney, the governor of Michigan, who was sort of the great white hope of the Republican establishment in the day. And along comes Nixon, and everything he had put together worked. And he got nominated and comes to Miami Beach and accepts the nomination. And I was there. It's the first time I laid eyes on Ronald Reagan in person. I was behind the scenes, and I had to give press releases out to the press corps. They'd mimeograph them with the purple ink and all this stuff, give them to the pages, and then we would take them out. And I'm backstage running along, and suddenly there's Ronald Reagan dressed like a movie star. Instead of the navy blue suits and red ties and all this, he was wearing a white sport coat, chocolate slacks, a white shirt with a brown tie, and he looked exactly like a movie star. And I thought to myself, my God, maybe he'll be president. Little did I know I would wind up working for him in the White House. But
That's amazing.
You just never know how things are going to turn out. And so there's somebody out there, I have no doubt, on the Democratic side that we're not really thinking about, but they will show up, and American history moves on.
Well, in speaking about your story about Reagan, before we went live, you were telling me stories about President Trump and your meetings with him. So before we close out, I would love to hear like one of your most memorable times that you met with President Trump and what he did, because you were telling me some good stories before we went live.
He's a very funny guy. He has a great sense of humor. I mean, he is without doubt very serious and pointed and all of that kind of thing. But he's also very relaxed and funny and all of this kind of thing. And one story I'll tell you is right off of the Oval Office, there's a little short hallway. And if you go to the end of it, it's like a conference. There's a long conference table set up there, and he would keep files, things that he's working on piled up there. And right before you got to that room, there was a small windowless room where he kept gifts. He gave me, you can't see it here, but he gave me a silver tray with the presidential seal and his name inscribed on it for my mother. He knew I was taking care of my 90-year-old mom at that time. So he takes us back to show us something in the conference room, because there was a big screen TV there, and he wanted to show us something there. But as we're doing this, we're passing the little windowless room, and he stops all of a sudden, turns around, goes like this inside, raises his eyebrows and says, "Bill and Monica."
Oh, that's great.
What can I say? I don't know that you should use that story, but it was funny. But a good sense of humor he has, without doubt.
Well, you have seen many sides of him that, of course, the rest of us aren't. So I appreciate a fun story, because he has such a serious job, and he's working so hard for we the people and for the nation and for the world.
I just think we're blessed to have him in that chair, and he's done an outstanding job, and he is without question going to leave office with this country in a much better place than it was when he found it. And hopefully his successors, Republicans and Democrats, take note of the things that he has done that have worked and really been good for the country. And I certainly hope so. But we owe him a debt of gratitude without doubt. He will. I've read, you can't see it here, but sitting in my library, and up there, the books start with George Washington, and they go all the way over here in order and end down below with Donald Trump, with every president there. And I've read most of all of these books over the decades. And he is, without doubt, going to go down as a great president. I have no doubt of that.
I agree. Well, God bless you, Jeff. Thank you so much for being on today. It has been a great show. I've loved your insights. The audience has too. I love all the comments. And looks like JJR and other people love your joke that you told about President Trump. So that's been well received.
Well, that's good. Well, he's terrific, and we're lucky to have him.
Exactly. So how can people find you, Jeff? How can they? I know you do a lot of writing. You're on
well, I see scroll under thejeffreylord.com, which is my website. And of course, I have a podcast, The Word of the Lord with Jeffrey Lord.
Yes, yes.
So I got to thank Dad for that last name. It's and all the lords that came before.
Yeah.
And it has helped on occasion. We used to get these when I was growing up. We'd get a phone call. I'd pick up the phone, and it's some kid on the other end. And I'd hear, "Is this the Lord's house?" I'd say, "Yeah." "Well, let us pray." Click. So you never know.
That is a great name. I agree. Well, thank you again for being on. I would love to have you back soon.
Sure.
I love your.
Well, Lynn, I got to tell you, having been through these and when, in 1986, working in the White House and the Congress, the off-year elections, these things can be just jam-packed with action and activity and all sorts of stuff going on. And I don't think this year is going to be any different. I think things are going to be really crazy in a lot of ways, with a lot of activity. You've got all these races for Congress, Senate, governor. In some of these states, you probably have resolutions on A, B, or C that people are voting for. So we will be busy. There will be an endless amount to talk about, without doubt. So as I say on occasion in columns, buckle in.
I love that. Well, let's all buckle in, folks. And until next time, this is the Lynne Scott Hagerman podcast, where light is breaking through and the truth is rising, and so are we. Praise God.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call.